was a warm late September Saturday morning, the day after my 67th birthday. And I was out fairly early. First was an errand to my kid's house for something who knows, who can remember. So before I left the house, I mentally filed a flight plan, meandering through some adjacent neighborhoods, piloting on my Sport Glide. I was trying to get to Bass Pro Shops, a Chief Special retention holster for to buy. Riding into the early fall morning was a delight, with the shady parts cool enough to let a weather-exposed rider almost get a taste of the impending colder days to come. And then into the sunlight again. What a sweet contrast, feeling the warm come back for another try, for another ever shorter day. Having stopped at an intersection and then accelerating away from the just turned green, I crossed and shifted into second at about 25 miles per hour. This road was 2 lanes, one each way, and divided by a solid yellow line. As the road slowly climbed through a couple of longish, loose turns, side streets intersected along my whole route. My road had the right-of-way, but we take zero for granted, right? Ahead on my left, and maybe 2/3 of an American football field distant, and stopped at the sign, stood a black Ford SUV. As I momentarily fixed my gaze on the driver, even though the distance was a bit far for good eye-to-eye understanding, I felt he saw me, being as the bike was big, red, and rumbled forth with authority, shining in the sun. I expected all drivers to have seen all of this, you know. Expectations are really the only thing that ever let us down. Glancing right, to ensure that another closer side street presented no vehicular threat, then scanning back to my left, expecting to see that the black Ford SUV was awaiting my eventual passing. Eventual passing's probably an unfortunate choice of words here. As sudden as any of the rest of this, along comes a mucho clinching pucker. That black Ford SUV was now crossing my path. I remember, somewhere in there may have been a staccato, rapid-fire, short but quick stream of expletives on that timeline, but I remember watching the black Ford SUV about to cross my T. I was stabbing at the rear brake. On the other side, I was achieving first gear. And for all that short but drawn-out evolution, I was thinking, this is going to hurt. I'm assuming my brain hit my skull when my skull hit the liner of the helmet I wore. I assume all that because what I actually remember is opening my eyes, helmeted head buried in a shattered passenger side front door window, looking down at some clutter on the road thinking, those are pieces of my wheels. And that, ow, both wrists were jacked up. I was also being entertained by some distant left knee throbbing, and any brain I had left was now letting me know it had also entered the chat via headache. Now here's the thing. In the years since 1967, I have fallen off various bikes in lots of creative ways with no help from any other parties. I was truly authoring my own fate and learning with each surviving year how to ride ever better. And here's another thing. It is very difficult to impart lessons I've learned to situations where my input is suddenly and, despite best practices, insignificant. I let that sink in. I let that sink in all the time. The other driver, turns out, was 19, and right this minute he was looking about 12 years old. As he bent my head to my helmet, letting me know he had to move his, and the way his face looked, probably his mama's black Ford SUV out of the street. I asked, still astride my bike, its nose buried in the sheet metal of the black Ford SUV, for someone to please call an EMT. And I told the boy who just wrecked maybe Mom's black Ford SUV, I don't know if I'm hurt. I'm not going to move to the medic skid here. If you move your black Ford SUV, I will fall into the road. I then put my still helmeted head down and heard distant sirens. Pretty good response time, I thought, with absolutely no concept of time at all. As the medics extracted me, it was determined there were no broken bones sticking out, but I did get to wear a fancy hat with a fat Puritan decolletage to keep my head and neck immobile while both were still hurting mightily. Hoisting me deftly into the lowered gurney, one of the docs said, "Is that yours?" pointing at my .38 Special, which, because I didn't yet have that retention holster, the quest for which got me here. "Yes," I replied, managing to hook the gun with my damaged paws. "Here's something good to know. You will cheerfully surrender an unloaded firearm with any ammo to the medic. The hospital's ER will require same before putting any of your corporeal stuff back where it belongs." Back to the story. From my fancy new ambulance suite, I answered the police officer's questions, and he said it looked to be failure to yield on the driver of the black Ford SUV. I may have provided some "I think so" answers, as any remaining memory is nebulous. Then, my new friends in white opened a couple of lines, and we all went to the hospital. I was worthy only of lights, no siren. I didn't care whether there was a siren or lights or not at this point. I just lay there thinking a couple of things. I hurt, and my motorcycle is broke. And where's my motorcycle? Something good to know. You will learn much from the accident report number, which was provided sometime during the initial police interview. It will go home with you. My lawyer later described all of this to the adversarial read other drivers insurance company as a serious accident. His words were not hyperbolic. 5 hours in the ER was an adventure of discovery. No damage that would greatly accelerate anyone's, mine own, imminent death was discovered. And they looked or probed everywhere, including places usually described or located under or up in. Senses were telling me these medics were first class, and while their hearts were warm, their instruments were not. Here's an inventory. I got a headache. My traps are really lighting up, and both shoulders are almost keeping up in the pain coefficient. My wrists are sprained, and movement thereof was a punishment. The fingers on my right hand, the tops were covered with blood blisters between the knuckles. It looks like my glove material had bunched up on itself with skin, and in its collapsing and in tightening creases, just pinched the stuff out of my finger tops. A rare injury. My left knee took some kind of unremembered hit. Just as a fun fact, resulting long-term stiffness from this knee thing prompted my sale of a fine Mustang GT 6-speed. It became sketchy with questionable knee function to hold the clutch in traffic. Here's the story about the rest of the Saturday after my birthday. My daughter was called, ride home endured, ER provided happy pills taken, slow, hot, careful shower, and to bed for just over 17 hours. Hey, it's Sunday, it's midday, I'm up, sorta, and everything throbs, burns, itches, or is slightly maimed. My skull is not yet right, and I'm learning my balance is off. I reckon that little bump on the head was significant. That was pretty much the sum of the first day after. Oh yeah, I advised my insurance company, providing all numbers on docs that accompanied me home. The next day, the chronic pain would begin. The insurance company representing the driver of the black Ford SUV began to call. The pain was that the rep called and texted a lot. They were very ready to get my settlement paid for my bike damage and pain and suffering. I thought, how nice, the obvious concern for me to get a speedy payout. How nice. So nice. Again, nice, and nice again. Nice can get stale. Sometime that Lizard's insurance company rep was nice 3 or 4 times in a 12-hour period. Fortunately, I let their anxiety become my anxiety, and that prompted me to hire a lawyer. When a lawyer agrees to take your case, be advised, do what they tell you. Things like don't mention or discuss this accident or case on the internet, no social media related to this accident or recovery. Good advice, follow it. You're going to provide everything you have to the lawyer, including paperwork pertaining to anything about anything practically. You're going to ask your lawyer if he has all he needs. Ask questions. You got to be proactive. Something that came to me sometime during the process was, I wonder if the driver of the black Ford SUV was on the phone. Was he? Did I actually see that? I got hit on the head. I don't know. Be seen cooperating fully in your own recovery. You want to be proactive in these recuperative pursuits. It benefits you and it benefits your lawyer's efforts to get a suitable recovery for you and a fair payday for him. Do not submarine your lawyer's efforts by not being on your own team. Here's something good to know. From the time you hire the lawyer, you will cease communications with the other insurance company. They may offer you a settlement cordially, always cordially. Advise them they need to contact your lawyer and cheerfully, always cheerfully, provide his email address. Hang up. As things progress, they'll make a settlement offer and the answer is no, at least for the first two offers. Then negotiations can really begin. Here's something good to know. If you have Foxtrot uniform money, it will be easier to wait out the other guys. They will try to lowball you. When you're considering anything they offer you, remember you may have to be negotiating for a potential lifelong injury, something for which you will pay in blood, sweat, and tears for as long as you live. You want to be compensated for that. You want to be made whole. That's the end game here. Keep that in mind. All of that is good to know. Now, subsequent offers, they're going to get sweeter to a point. My lawyer and I discussed the practicalities of our case, and I told him that I didn't want to ruin this young man's life, but I wanted him to think about it when he next had an opportunity to not murder another motorist on a motorcycle. I asked for what amount was the fella insured, and it was $1,000. Considering he was young, he had no assets, and pursuit of any assets would take us to court, perhaps a lengthy process, we determined to settle only for the insured amount. That amount, and you can math it, plus $15K to rebuild the Sport Glide, and I was done. There were also a few bills from physical therapists and several doctors, ER, ambulance, a few other bills which were covered by the Lizards Insurance Company. About a week after the crash, I got back on the horse. I took my Z900 RS Cafe out around the hood. I realized I had at least one issue when leaning into a 45-mile-per-hour sweeping turn, and that I'm unsure of my horizon. Now, I've experienced vertigo while on a night dive in a previous life, and that was easy to remedy. To know which way was up, I just followed the bubbles. They always go up, you know. Challenge overcome. This was different out here on the road. I had Sky, I had terra firma, but in that moment leaned into this turn at a moderate angle. I just wasn't sure what to do with it. It's hard to ride well if you don't trust Newton. Physical laws say I won't fall over, but my inner ear protests with an alternate science. Sometime later, I had discussed this with a head doctor specialist to whom I'd been referred, and he was unable to tell me if this orientation anomaly, orientation anomaly was transient or my new persistent lifelong friend. Whatever your physical limitations resulting from another driver's negligence, as I stated before, these things can be with you for the rest of your life. You want to mitigate future hardships while you're this young. Whatever your age, you're never going to be this young again. And so get treated down, keep track, and keep your legal team in the loop. Anything out of pocket requires receipts and accounting. This needs to be part of your recovery, being made whole. I know this gets repetitive for you to hear. It's important. Being made whole involves basically money. Money to pay the many and varied med bills, not forgetting physical therapy, where a 5'even", 92-pound woman can make a 6'2", 220-pound man cry out in tears. And this with zero emotional involvement. Here's some other getting in touch with reality stuff. I reckon a come to Jesus moment arrives soon enough. I had wanted to travel on motorcycles and shoot photographs. That was my retirement plan in broad strokes. A couple of the bikes had already been outfitted for long distance travel with mission capable bags and luggage and stuff. And on top of that, I had about 6 bikes at the time of this decision. Was it Detective Harry Callahan who said a man's got to know his limitations? I would have recalled that accurately before my head, my neck, my arms, wrists, and some right hand fingers were all fairly encumbered. Pain, bruising, swole up, and my equilibrium was about 1/3 a bubble off plumb. Even though wearing armor in the joints of my pants and jacket, something happened to my left knee. It was sketchy when standing and uncertain of bearing upon descent of steps. I avoided escalators completely. Best not ask. The long-term prognosis on any of these treats was unknown. I could do the therapy, stay as healthy as possible, including using the best disposition I could muster. And here's the thing, being a dick with attitude towards folks who are there for you and didn't put you in this situation is not the karmic seed one wants to sow. So new retirement plan. Sell or trade all bikes and the Explorer and the Mustang GT for a pickup suitable for towing a small, self-contained travel trailer. Sparing you the tedious detail, done did it all by spring of 2021. I had enough money to outfit any out-of-pocket expenses for the rig, and so far it's taken us to Jekyll Island and Acadia and a few shorter photo safaris. It's not a terrible plan B. Now it's December of 2023 and I have never not been interested in bikes. So I've sort of looked at the market, always watching for examples of a good value. In my ramblings, I saw a barely used SV650 at a nearby dealer, and next thing I know, I've struck a deal contingent upon my riding impressions. And when I got on and started the bike, I sat a minute while getting my helmet first, and then gloves squared away, and I pulled the clutch lever and got a positive click into first and started to get all, ASMR with the visceral input. As I let out the clutch, my 50-odd years of muscle memory just knew, and I found a smile inside and out. I hit the moderate midday traffic and felt my way around the newish but familiar kinetic environment. My shifts weren't quite smooth, but I didn't miss any of them. I didn't stall. I didn't leave the signals on after turning. Not bad. Bike good, deal made, ride home, all good. Now I have to tell my daughter, who 3 years ago retrieved me from the ER and was very unjudgmental about the crash. I was not. I felt guilty at the time. No dad should have his child see him in the ER. That is 0 dad cool points. I made the call and got the, "Dad!" I told her about the curiosity regarding could I still do this, about the easy recall of mechanical skills, and the smile on my fat face when I went kickstand up and motored off smoothly after a 3-year hiatus from throttle friction zone stuff. These experiences were telling me any crazy scaredy-assness was gone. Apparently my pitch was money and she was on board and good to go. Insurance in place, I needed to set up the ergos on the bike so it felt right to be, and I got the bars and controls so they lined up like I wanted them to, and began reacquiring the finer skills of riding in traffic. Those skills are considered frangible, and if you don't practice them, they denigrate a lot. I rode a few park roads, neighborhood streets, spiced with some main urban pikes and roads. I avoided riding during times of low visibility or high traffic density. I was very careful about speed around intersecting streets, and I studied my own technique to build more buffer twixt my safety and the evil forces intent on maiming bikers. Early on, I relearned this notable lesson that if I'm changing lanes or even just altering my path in my own lane, use the mirrors. You need those mirrors, by the way, and you also need to turn your head and look. You can't be lazy. I look over my shoulder quickly and comprehensively, but what I'm looking for in looking over either or both shoulders is another vehicle occupying or intent on occupying the space where I want to be. Don't insist on being in that place. You will lose. Be nice, forgiving even. Grace beats a middle finger most days. By the way, the mirror look over shoulder habit is good at stoplights also, where you are subject to a vehicle looming from behind. If you know it's coming and have an escape route ready and jump on it and get out of the way, or at least cover behind something hard, well, you can figure it out. What I'm getting to is, I guess, a perception of the refurbished biker which is one of the things I might call myself. The lessons learned long ago come back, and they join a few new ideas about self-preservation in a admittedly chosen, more dangerous than not habit. Here's some pretty easy refurbished biker lessons. Talking about less than ideal conditions, mostly weather and or traffic, sometimes a mouthy pillion and such, for bikes is not the same as for cars. These conditions are of note also when footing it. My position is, when I'm deciding to ride or drive and I gotta go, being retired, if I'm going, I gotta go, I ask myself, would I walk in this weather for 10 minutes? There's your answer. And about that retired thing, I don't have to battle commuting traffic, so I don't. Likewise, if it's too cold or hot or wet, I choose to avoid these conditions. If a bike trip in unsavory conditions is necessary and required, you need to adjust your plan and technique accordingly. Usually for a biker, the panacea for a malady of crap conditions is a big tote sack full of slow down. I've also taken seriously the lesson about becoming religious regarding maintenance. I'm especially trying to keep tire pressure in the known and acceptable spectrum. Now, if the engine quits or I throw a chain, I can handle those situations. But if I experience a blowout or the tire washes out of turn because of insufficient air, if either of those occur, mates, that is what you call existential. It has to say happening right now. So don't go there. Check the tire pressure. Do it for 2 weeks and it becomes a habitual act of self-respect. Here's a memorable lesson. I wear the gear as I love the Constitution, which is to say all the time. I try to be meek to life's lessons, learning from the teaching, and had I not been wearing the gear while losing traffic jousting, my injuries could have been horrific. My full coverage helmet alone, you get it, you've heard it, you know, I gotta tell you, I know. Without the gloves, my fingers and hands would have run through buku glass and the same glass scrub for my exposed face and eyes had I not had the shield on my helmet. Or, without whatever the next gear, the outcome, well, it certainly would have been ghastly. Now, here's a lesson that may be contrary to what many do or believe. I choose not to have anything other than ambient road sounds in my ear. It's just one old guy on a bike being as situationally aware as he's able. And regarding the awareness thing, my head is on a swivel. I'm looking around and in the mirrors. This scan is constant in traffic and marginally reduced on open road. I knew a few aviators in a previous life, and they would say things like, honor the threat, and the one identifying the threat first usually wins. I like those guys. They all had a bit of Merc and cowboy in them. By the way, attack pilots, they fling themselves, their plane and its ordnance at the earth below at alarming speeds. Yeah, the ones who fly planes with an A designation before the model number, those attack types are a different style of insane. Getting my win and back to the threat honor of concept, I say everything on the road should be honored as a threat. Follow the aviator's teachings. If I identify the threat early, I can win. In this scenario, I win by avoiding, and avoiding is a strength of our maneuverable choice of transportation. I guess somehow I'm trying to impart to you. I've learned a lot in the last few months, and I learned about insurance companies and legal practices and medical procedures and the expense thereof. I learned a bit about physics and a bit of range of motion achievement in a PT setting. I learned how to achieve physical equilibrium again, although I don't push it. I've learned the lesson that I'm fortunate and that I've been graced. And it doesn't hurt to spread that grace around a little bit. Ride well.